The public is conditioned to watch the skies for missiles. This is a strategic misdirection. The primary vector of attack in the next conflict is not kinetic. It is silent. The thesis that great powers have lost their moral compass is now operational doctrine. While new technologies are engineered to shape U.S. warfare, the systemic liability is the network they depend upon. 99% of all global data flows through a handful of undersea fiber optic cables. An attack here is not an act of war, it is a trigger for a global solvency crisis. The second vector is orbital. Non-kinetic blinding of satellite constellations removes the eyes and ears of a military apparatus. A fighting force that cannot see, cannot navigate, and cannot communicate is merely a collection of expensive, inert assets. CSIS reports confirm this is a primary asymmetric protocol. This two-pronged assault creates the blind Leviathan, a superpower with unmatched kinetic force but stripped of its senses. It cannot verify threats, command its forces, or stabilize its markets. This isn't a future scenario. While U.S. senators flag the 3,000 to 200 foreign nationals inside sensitive national labs and Japanese scholars warn of information warfare, the physical infrastructure for total paralysis remains the core vulnerability. The adversary's blueprint is not to match the kinetic cost of a carrier group. The protocol is to engineer a state of informational chaos that forces a panicked, reflexive, launch-on warning escalation. The first shot will not be a missile. It will be the sound of silence. The core motive is not ideology. It is solvency. A nation-state, like a corporation, can become insolvent when its domestic liabilities, political unrest, economic stagnation, and unpopular war exceed its capacity to pay. At this point, the leadership has two options: internal collapse or externalizing the crisis through conflict. Consider the Russian Federation. Analysts at CSIS frame the ongoing war not as a conventional conquest but as a solvency event. Faced with immense domestic liability and the unsustainable kinetic cost of an unpopular war, the state required a pivot. A direct, symmetrical military victory against a NATO-backed opponent is mathematically improbable. This is the inflection point. Weakness forces a pivot to asymmetry. When a power cannot afford to win on the conventional battlefield, its only logical protocol is to shift the attack vector. It must target the rival's systemic vulnerabilities where the cost-to-damage ratio is exponentially higher: finance, technology, and information. This is not an isolated strategy. It is a global blueprint. As one analyst warns, great powers have lost their moral compass, making threats from rivals like China a reality. Source number 1. This is why Japanese scholars raise alarms over Chinese anti-Taiwan messaging. Source number 4. And why U.S. senators seek to ban Chinese nationals from government labs to protect the AI race. Source number 3. Each is a calculated probe of a non-military, high-leverage target. The motive, therefore, is survival. A state facing a solvency crisis adopts a launch-on warning posture. It must escalate asymmetrically or face collapse. This isn't a miscalculation. It's a mathematical certainty driven by domestic weakness. The liability becomes the accelerant for the next kinetic phase. The protocol for conventional warfare is economically obsolete. The entire model is based on a fatal assumption that lethality is expensive. It is not. The primary vector of asymmetric escalation is economic, not kinetic. Data from the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, confirms the mathematical certainty. A $5 million main battle tank can be neutralized, its asset value liquidated, by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a one-to-one trade. It is a systemic solvency crisis for any military structured around expensive, centralized platforms. This phenomenon is known clinically as the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting force has collapsed. The ability to execute a kinetic strike, once the exclusive domain of nation-states with trillion-dollar budgets, is now available to any non-state actor with a credit card and an internet connection. This creates unsustainable economic leverage against the stronger power. For every $500 spent on offense, the defense must spend millions on countermeasures, electronic warfare, layered air defense, active protection systems. The objective is not to win a battle, but to bankrupt the adversary's defense architecture. This forces the legacy power into a launch-on-warning posture, making preemptive kinetic escalation a mathematical inevitability to avoid financial collapse. The regional instability you are being shown is a strategic misdirection. CSS reports confirm these territories are not the locus of conflict, but designated gray zones, proxy laboratories for testing asymmetric attack protocols at a low kinetic cost. The primary vector is not military, but technological infiltration. A recent bipartisan letter from 11 U.S. senators revealed a critical liability. In FY 2024, approximately 3,200 Chinese nationals have access to 17 Department of Energy national laboratories, the very sites tasked with accelerating U.S. AI innovation. This is not a flaw in the system. It is the protocol. The national labs function as a staging ground. The objective is not just data exfiltration, but to undermine the United States' core technological solvency from within, turning a collaborative asset into a systemic liability. Simultaneously, the information vector is being beta tested in other gray zones. Japanese scholars have issued warnings regarding targeted Chinese anti-Taiwan messaging. This is a live-fire exercise in psychological warfare, perfecting influence operations before they are deployed against Western populations. This entire strategy is enabled by a single condition, noted by observers like Shashi Tharoor: the perception that great powers lost moral compass. This breakdown of established order removes the threat of conventional reprisal, creating the ideal environment for asymmetric escalation. The math is irrefutable. These proxy laboratories are used to calibrate non-kinetic weapons, from information campaigns to novel technologies like the sonic weapons mentioned in recent defense reports. The next phase is not theoretical. It is the deployment of these tested protocols from the gray zone directly against the domestic civilian infrastructure of the primary target. The experiment is over. Implementation is next. The nuclear command protocol known as launch-on-warning is a systemic liability from a previous era. As defined by analysts at CSIS, it dictates that if early warning systems detect an incoming nuclear strike, a nation must launch its own missiles before the incoming warheads can destroy its retaliatory capability. The decision window is measured in minutes. This is no longer a theoretical risk. The vector for catastrophic failure is no longer a radar anomaly. It is a cyber attack. We are now in the fog of digital war. When a hostile actor blinds a nation's digital eyes, its satellite networks and ground-based radar, the command authority cannot distinguish a system failure from a successful decapitation strike. The absence of data becomes the signal. This is not a mistake. It is a calculated feature of asymmetric escalation. While legacy media focuses on conventional threats, the real blueprint for attack is being refined elsewhere. Reports confirm that 11 U.S. senators have warned the Department of Energy about thousands of Chinese nationals with access to its 17 national laboratories, which oversee sensitive nuclear and AI research. This access is the delivery mechanism. The protocol does not allow for deliberation. If the screen goes black, the commander is forced to assume the worst-case scenario and initiate the launch sequence. The fear of being disarmed compels a kinetic response. An asymmetric cyber attack thus leverages an archaic doctrine to trigger a full-scale, symmetric nuclear exchange. It is the perfect low-cost method for a weaker power to force a solvency crisis on a superpower. The decisive conflict vector is no longer kinetic. It is systemic. The protocol of asymmetric escalation dictates that a weaker power must surgically target a rival's solvency. The calibration shot for this new doctrine is imminent. Within the next 12 months, expect a catastrophic, multi-hour outage at a Tier 4 data center co-locating federal research and private financial clearing services. The official narrative will cite cascading hardware failure or a solar flare. The unofficial signal will be understood. We can sever your digital spinal cord at will. The blueprint for this vector is not a secret. A letter from 11 U.S. senators confirmed that in FY 2024 alone, approximately 3,200 foreign nationals from a primary rival state were granted access to the 17 DOE national laboratories. This is the same infrastructure President Trump ordered to launch an AI initiative with the urgency of the Manhattan Project. According to CSIS, this access is no longer a liability. It is a pre-positioned asymmetric asset. This calibration shot is not an act of war. It is a price discovery exercise for the cost of future conflict. The event will occur between a Tuesday and Thursday, outside of U.S. market hours, to maximize diagnostic value and signal deliberate, controlled capability. The objective is to test U.S. response protocols and demonstrate that the kinetic cost of defending allies, as noted in warnings regarding Taiwan, can be rendered moot by a non-kinetic attack on the homeland's financial and technological solvency.